So here's a book that I'm reading nowadays by Noam Chomsky, Power Systems. These are in the form of conversations on global democratic uprisings and the new challenges to the US empire. It's interviews with David Barzamine. Now, Noam Chomsky is an American professor and public intellectual known for his work in linguistics, political activism, and social criticism. And often he is referred to as the father of modern linguistics. So there's this question that David asks, and this is Cambridge, Massachusetts, May 15, 2012. It's been more than 5 decades since you first wrote about universal grammar, the idea of an inborn capacity in every human brain that allows a child to learn language. What are some of the more recent developments in the field? That's the question. And this is what he has to say. No. Well, that gets technical, but there's very exciting work going on refining the proposed principles of universal grammar. The concept is widely misunderstood in the media and in public discussions. Universal grammar is something different. It is not a set of universal observations about language. In fact, there are interesting generalizations about language that are worth studying. But universal grammar is a study of the genetic basis for language, the genetic basis of the language faculty. He goes on to say that there can't be any serious doubt that something like that exists. Otherwise, an infant couldn't reflexively acquire language from whatever complex data is around. So that's not controversial. The only question is what the genetic basis of the language faculty is. Here, there are some things that we can be pretty confident about. For one thing, it doesn't appear that there's any delectable variation among humans. They all seem to have the same capacity. There are individual differences as they are with everything, but no real group differences except maybe way of way at the margin. So that means, for example, if an infant from a Papua New Guyana tribe that hasn't had contact with other humans for 30,000 years comes to Boulder, Colorado, it will speak like any kid in Colorado because all children have the same language capacity and the converse is true. This is distinctly human. There is nothing remotely like it among other organisms. What explains this? Well, if you go back 50 years, the proposals that were made when this topic came on the agenda were quite complex. In order just to account for the descriptive facts that you saw in many different languages, it seems necessary to assume that universal grammar permitted highly intricate mechanisms, varying a lot from language to language because languages looked very different from one another. Over the past 50 to 60 years, one of the most significant developments, I think, is a steady move continuing today towards trying to reduce and refine the assumptions so that they maintain or even expand their explanatory power for particular languages, but become more feasible with regard to other conditions that the answer must meet. Whatever it is in our brain that generates language developed quite recently in evolutionary time, presumably within the last 100,000 years, something very significant happened, which is presumably the source of human creative endeavor in a wide range of fields: creative arts, tool making, complex social structures. Then it's paleoanthropologists sometimes call it the Great Leap Forward. It's generally assumed plausibly that this change had to do with the emergence of language. for which there's no real evidence before in human history or any other species. Whatever happened had to be pretty simple because that's a very short time span for evolutionary changes to take place. The goal of the study of universal grammar is to try to show that there is indeed something quite simple that can meet these various conditions. A plausible theory has to account for the variety of languages and the detail that you see in the surface study of languages, and at the same time be simple enough to explain how language could have emerged very quickly through some small mutation of the brain or something like that. There has been a lot of progress towards that goal, and in a parallel effort to try to account for the apparent variability of languages by showing that in fact the perceived differences are superficial. The seeming variability has to do with the minor changes in a few of the structural principles that are fixed. Discoveries in biology have encouraged this line of thinking. If you go back to the late 1970s, Francois Jacob argued that if it could well turn out that probably is true, that the differences between species, let's say an elephant and a fly, could be traceable to minor changes in the regulatory circuits of the genetic system, the genesis that determine what other genes do in particular places. He shared the Nobel Prize for early work on this topic. It looks like something similar may be true of language. There's now work on an extraordinarily broad range of typologically different languages, and more it looks like that. There's plenty of work to do, but a lot of this research falls into place in ways that were unimaginable 30 or 40 years ago. In biology, it was plausible quite recently to claim that organisms can vary virtually without limit and that each one has to be studied on its own. Nowadays, that has changed so radically that serious biologists propose that there's basically one multicellular animal, that the universal Noam, which means a complete set of genetic material present in a cell or organism, and that all the genomes of all the multicellular animals that have developed since the Cambrian explosion half a billion years ago was just modifications of a single pattern. This thesis hasn't been proven, but it is taken seriously. Sometimes similar Something similar is going on, I think, in the study of language. Actually, I should make it clear that this is a minority view if you count noses. Most of the work on language doesn't even comprehend these developments or take them seriously. So you see, though, I mean, how well he answers questions. One little question, and I mean, he's so full of knowledge. It's a delight to read his books on linguistics. I'll certainly read more of from this book. Till then, let's wait.